Even though it's Christmas holiday, AI never sleeps, and this week has also been absolutely insane. We have not one, but two new open source models that are now state of the art. These even rival the top closed models out there like Gemini 3 and GPT 5.2. We finally have some nice open source AIs that can generate longer videos. This is now the best open source image editor you can use offline. It's just like Nano Banana, where you can edit images with natural language. We have another AI that can adjust the focus of a photo, so you can use this to easily fix a photo that was shot out of focus. This AI can animate any portrait with a reference video. Best of all, it's 6 times faster than other methods, and it stays consistent even if the video is really long. This AI can take a single photo of a scene and turn it into a complete 3D scene with individual objects which you can edit further. We have another AI that can detect the properties of all the objects in an image. This AI can place and animate any character into a 3D world as if they're playing the video game, and a lot more. So let's jump right in. First up, NVIDIA releases a really cool AI agent called Nitrogen, which can autonomously play almost any video game out there. So this is a vision action foundation model, which was trained on 40,000 hours of gameplay from over 1,000 different games. And because its training data is so diverse, it's able to play all these video games autonomously, plus even games it has never seen before. Now, it's called a Vision Action Foundation model because they trained it to play video games just like how a human would play. So the vision component means the AI is able to see the gameplay, and then the action component means it's able to use a joystick or controller, just like a human would. And these are all the things that it can access. It can't hack the code of the game and somehow play it that way. It's playing the game just like how a human would play, by looking at the screen and then figuring out what actions or key presses to take. Here you can see the breakdown of all the different games that were used to train it. So it's mostly given action RPG games, but also platformer games, action adventure, sports, and so on and so forth. And as you can see from these examples, it's able to detect what's happening in the game and execute some pretty complex moves to beat the game. For example, here it's able to understand how to flip the car, or how to fight this giant spider, or do some other really complex stuff that requires multiple steps or some logical reasoning. The awesome thing is, if you scroll up to the top of the page, they've already released the code to this. So if you click on this GitHub repo and you scroll down a bit, here it contains all the instructions on how to download and set this up on your computer. Anyways, all the links are up here, so if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. Next up, the Tongyi Lab from Alibaba continues to release some really cool stuff. This one is called FlashPortrait, and this can generate infinite length portrait animation videos that are 6 times faster than previous methods. So here are some examples for your reference. You just need a reference image of a character, and then you can act out a scene or upload any other reference video, and it would map their facial movements onto this new character. And as you can see, this video is super long, but the dude remains consistent across the entire video. And it doesn't matter if the reference image and the reference video is in different perspectives. It's still able to map her movements onto the new character very accurately. Here's another example for your reference. Now note that this is mostly like face and head transfer, so it doesn't actually transfer the entire body movements of this reference video. So it's mostly for like talking avatar videos. Here's another example for your reference. And like I said, this one can do infinite length videos. So like this video is over a minute long, and as you can see, the character remains consistent the whole time. Here's another example where the original reference video is on the left, and as you can see, her expressions are super tricky, but for the most part, it's able to transfer these facial expressions over to a new character pretty accurately. It's not as exaggerated as the original video, but it's still very good. Now, if you compare this with other portrait animation tools like Live Portrait or Hunyuan Portrait, Fantasy Portrait, or Wan Animate, all of which I've gone over on my channel before. Notice that for some of these tools like Live Portrait, they're limited to only a few seconds of animation, and then for the other tools, although you can try to generate longer videos, the character just warps considerably over time. So for example, for Fantasy Portrait, you can see that it just gets worse and worse as you generate a longer video. And then, as you can see now, X Portrait is starting to turn out pretty bad. Now let me fast forward this a bit, and as you can see, even Hunyuan Portrait and Wan Animate are now starting to look pretty awful. There's a lot more noise and artifacts going on with the generation. But as you can see, for this new FlashPortrait, which is on the lower right corner, the character still remains consistent after such a long video. Here's another example for your reference. Note that you can upload a reference video that doesn't have to be in the same perspective as the image of your character. So this person is just playing guitar, but it's still able to transfer only her facial movements over to the character image. And again, as we fast forward, notice that some of the other competitors like Fantasy Portrait already start to look pretty awful. Like, it doesn't even look like the character anymore. The awesome thing is, if you scroll up to the top of the page, they've already released the code to this. So if you click on this GitHub repo and you scroll down a bit, here it says they've released both the inference code and the training code to this. Plus, they do plan to release these two types of inference codes in the future as well. If you scroll down a bit here, it contains all the instructions on how to download and set this up on your computer. And if you scroll down here, it says that for a 10-second video of this resolution at 25 frames per second, if you add this sequential CPU offload tag in your code, then it only requires approximately 10 gigabytes of VRAM. So keep that in mind. Anyways, all the links are up here, so if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. Next up, this AI is super useful. So if you ever took a photo that didn't turn out right or it was out of focus, this AI called Generative Refocusing can help you easily fix it afterwards. For example, you can take any photo and adjust the focus of the camera. For example, here we are adjusting the focus forward and backward. Or here's another example. So you can choose to take an existing photo and refocus it on any character or object. Here's another example where we can choose to focus on different parts of this image. Now, in addition to adjusting the focus of a photo, you can also adjust the aperture, or basically how much of the image is in focus. So for example, if we decrease the aperture, then more of the image is in focus, whereas if we increase the aperture, then we get a blurrier background, or in other words, a shallower depth of field. So it depends on what you're going for. If you want a cinematic look, then you can blur the background. Here's another example where we can choose to make the background a bit blurrier like this. And if we blur the background, then it kind of looks a bit more cinematic and professional. Or you can also do the reverse. Let's say this is your input photo with only this girl in focus, but you also want to focus everyone. Well, you can plug it through this AI, and here is what you get. Pretty easy. Or here's another example where it's super blurry, basically only her hand is in focus, but you can plug it through this AI and get it to regenerate the scene with everything else more in focus. Here's a really typical example where the dude in the foreground is out of focus because, well, he's just way too close to the camera. Well, we can fix that by, again, plugging it through this AI, and here is what we get. Now this photo is also really good, but let's say you want to actually remove the blur from this image. Well, we can plug it through this AI, and here is our result. It's able to add a lot more detail to the scene while keeping the girl consistent. The awesome thing is, if you scroll up to the top of the page, they have released a GitHub repo to this, and here it contains all the instructions on how to download and run this locally on your computer. They haven't mentioned the VRAM requirements for this, but if I click on the Hugging Face repo, it looks like everything is just like 2.6 gigabytes in size, so it's pretty lightweight. Anyways, if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. Also this week, Alibaba Qwen releases their latest version of Qwen Image Edit. So this is called Qwen Image Edit 2511, which is supposed to be released on November 25th, but it looks like they postponed it a month later. Now, if you're not familiar with Qwen Image Edit, this is like the best open source image editor that you can use offline. It's kind of like Nano Banana, so you can just prompt it to edit an existing image however you want. And this week, they released an updated, more powerful version of this. Here they claim that it has improved character consistency, so if this is your input image, well, you can generate this character in a Merry Christmas poster like this, and notice that she does look like the original photo. Or here's another example where you can generate a grid of these cards with different expressions and poses, and it's able to handle this very well. Here's another example where we can add two reference photos together, so we can get this person to hold this cat, and here's what we get. The really awesome thing is that they've also decided to integrate some popular LoRa's from the previous version of Qwen Image Edit directly into this new base model. So for example, there was this really useful relighting LoRa, which allows you to adjust the lighting of the scene. Well, this new Qwen Image Edit has this ability built in already. So you can take this original photo and relight the scene into something like this. Or here's another example where we can take this photo and spice up the lighting like this. Another really popular LoRa is this novel view synthesis, which basically allows you to take an existing photo and generate a different perspective of that scene. So for example, you can get it to zoom in and here's what you get. Or if this is your original image, well, you can prompt it to generate a front view and here's what you get. And like the previous Qwen Image Edit, this is also really good at like micro editing things in your image. For example, you can easily take this image and change the color of the car to gray like this. Or you can easily take this photo and then this other reference photo of this new wood texture and apply that to the table and chair, and here's what you get. Or here's another example where we can apply this pattern to this chair, and here's our result. And this new Qwen Image Edit 2511 does perform noticeably better than the previous version 2509. So here are some examples. Let's say we input this as the reference image, and we want to change her pose into something like this. Well, here's a comparison between both models. For this first pose, both of them look pretty good, but for the second pose, here is where the older model starts to show a lot more errors. Whereas for this new model, notice that her pose remains consistent with Federer. And then same with this pose, notice that the older model wasn't really able to handle this very well, whereas the new model handles it a lot better. Same with this test where if we want to combine these two characters, notice that the older model wasn't able to actually portray the anime girl very consistently, whereas this new one is a lot better. Anyways, there are a ton of really useful things you can do with Qwen Image Edit. Like I said, this is currently the best open source image editor you can use right now. And the awesome thing is they've released this already. So I'm on their Hugging Face space, and here's where you can download and use Qwen Image Edit. Note that there are already some quantized or GGUF versions of this that can run on lower VRAMs. So for example, here is a Hugging Face repo by Unsloth, and if you click on files and versions, as you can see here, this 2-bit version can even fit comfortably on like 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Anyways, everything is on this page, so if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this in the description below. Next up, this AI is pretty cool. It's called Inf-Cam, and this allows you to take an existing video, as you can see in the center, but this AI can change the camera movement or perspective to generate a new video of the scene. So for example, you can get it to pan up, down, left, right, or zoom in and out, or orbit to basically recreate the scene, but with the camera moving in a different way. So here are some other examples for your reference. Again, the video in the center is the original video, and you can recreate the scene with the camera panning or zooming or anything else. Notice how it's able to preserve the character consistency and expressions across all these generations, even though this is quite a tricky scene. Here's another example for your reference. Notice the chess pieces and the text in the background. It's also able to preserve all these details consistently across the generations. So really quickly, here's the architecture on how this works. So it would take your source video and your prompt, and it would run it through this diffusion transformer model, which is the backbone behind all the top video generators out there. But in addition, they've added this really special homography guided self-attention block. This helps the model line up the video frames correctly over time using camera geometry. And this makes sure everything like the characters and objects and their expressions are aligned frame by frame. And then it also has this warping module, which looks like this, and this simplifies the camera motion by splitting it into two steps: rotation and translation. And ultimately, this leads to more accurate and smoother camera motion in the generated video. Anyways, here are some comparisons with other competitors for your reference, such as ReCam Master and Trajectory Crafter, which I've gone over on my channel before. Notice that this new one is in the bottom left and the ground truth is the bottom row. And as you can see, this new one, Inf-Cam, is the most accurate one in recreating the scene using these different camera perspectives. Here are some quantitative benchmarks for your comparison. The values in bold are the best scores, and as you can see, this new one outperforms these other competitors across all these different benchmarks. If you scroll up to the top of the page, they've already released a GitHub repo to this. So if you click on this button, and if you scroll down a bit, here note that they've already released the training code and the inference code and the model to this. So here are all the instructions on how you can download and run this locally on your computer. However, note that here it says you do need over 50 gigabytes of VRAM to run this. So you need 48 gigabytes of memory for this UniDepth tool, and then 28 gigabytes for the Inf-Cam pipeline. However, because this is open source, there might be some quantized or more compressed versions of this in the future. Anyways, if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. In humanoid robot news, we have a new Unitree demo, which is really impressive. So this is a teleoperation demo. In other words, the human is basically copying the actions of this human almost in real time. The robot is... Oh, didn't see that coming, did ya? That was actually the highlight of this video. But all jokes aside, this is still really impressive. Like, the robot is basically copying the actions of this human almost in real time. What's particularly impressive is that he's not wearing any like bulky VR headset or any bulky motion tracking equipment, as we've seen with older demos, but he's still able to like teleoperate this robot almost in real time. The robot is able to mirror the full body movements from this human very naturally and smoothly while maintaining balance. And it probably kicked his nuts on purpose. This might be a sign that AGI is coming faster than you think. But anyways, with how fast this technology is moving, I think we're going to get real steel in real life pretty soon, where we have humans remotely operate these robots in fighting competitions. Or maybe physically demanding jobs, like construction or whatever, could be replaced by these robots actually doing the jobs, but with humans teleoperating them remotely behind the scenes. On my channel, I featured so many different AI models and tools, it can be very overwhelming. What if you can use all of these models all in one platform? And that brings us to ChatLLM by Abacus AI, the sponsor of this video. ChatLLM is an all-in-one platform for you to use the best AI models out there. You can seamlessly switch between different models in your chats. Plus, you can also use all the top image generators out there, as well as the top video models out there, all in one integrated platform. And they're usually very quick to add a model to their site once it comes out. Plus, if you're coding something, they have a really useful artifacts feature so that you can preview your generation side by side. Plus, they have a deep agent feature which can do some really complex tasks all autonomously, like creating PowerPoints, websites, and research reports. It's gonna supercharge your productivity. Best of all, you can access all of these AI models and image and video generators and Deep Agent for only $10 a month. This is way cheaper than if you paid for each tool separately. Definitely check out ChatLLM that comes with Deep Agent in the description below. Also this week, ByteDance drops this new AI called StoryMem. This is able to create longer cinematic videos by remembering what happened earlier in the story, so that the characters and the scenes remain consistent across multiple shots. Here are some examples. So here's an example where we have a video with multiple shots which are labeled below, and as you can see, the background plus the characters do remain consistent most of the time across these different shots. So here's how it works. It would first generate a video using a regular diffusion transformer model, and then it would select some keyframes from this generated video and then plug it into its memory bank. This is like keeping track of all the scenes and characters in the video so far. And then this memory bank will be plugged back as input in addition to your prompt so it can generate the next scene that is consistent with the previous videos. The awesome thing is, if you scroll up to the top of the page, they have released the code to this. If you scroll down a bit, here it contains all the instructions on how you can download and run StoryMem locally on your computer. Notice that this is based off of WAN 2.2 14b. Anyways, all the links are up here, so if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. Next up, this AI is super powerful. It's called ReCo, which stands for Regen Constraint in Context Generation, and this is basically a Nano Banana for video. You can micro-edit an existing video with a text prompt. Here are some examples. On the left is your original video, and you can prompt it to replace the man with a cartoon penguin, and here's what you get. Or here, you can replace the woman with a white swan, and here's your result. Or instead of just replacing the entire character, you can also micro-edit an existing character. For example, you can swap out his black beanie with a big fluffy white fur hat, and here's what you get. Or you can replace this robot vehicle with a white Jeep SUV, and here's your result. It's also very good at understanding things in your video. So even though there are two characters in the scene, it knows that you want to only replace the red-haired woman with this cartoon gnome, and that's indeed what it does. Instead of removing stuff or replacing stuff, you can also add stuff to your video. For example, you can add a cornbread on the cutting board, and here's your result. Or you can add a small golden crown on top of this seal's head. It's also quite good at removing objects, so you can completely remove the seal like this. Or you can remove the woman in the scene, and it does so quite seamlessly. And of course, you can also easily change a video into a different artistic style just with a text prompt. So here is a watercolor example. Here's a 3D animation example, and then here's a Lego example, although their faces look kind of creepy. Anyways, there are a ton of examples on this page. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go over everything, but if you compare this with other competitors like Lucy Edit or Ditto, which I've gone over on my channel before, it seems like this new one, ReCo, does even better at both addition, replacement, and stylization examples. Anyways, if you scroll up to the top of the page, they have released a GitHub repo, and if you click into it, here they have released this ReCo benchmark and evaluation code, and they are planning to release the model and inference code in 2 to 3 weeks, which is fantastic. Anyways, all the links are up here, so if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. Also this week, we have not one, but 2 new open source models that are state-of-the-art. So the first one is Minimax M2.1, and it's incredibly good at agentic coding and multi-step reasoning and solving some really complex tasks. As you can see from these benchmark scores here, it's like state-of-the-art in terms of Sweetbench verified, multi-Sweetbench, and Sweetbench multilingual. These benchmarks test an AI model's ability to code in different languages. And the crazy thing is, for these multilingual benchmarks, Minimax M2.1 is even better than the top closed models out there, including Claude 4.5 and Gemini 3 Pro and GPT 5.2. It's also extremely good across all these vibe coding benchmarks. So here are some of my quick tests. Here I prompted it to make a 3D racing game with speed boosts and collision physics. Put everything in a standalone HTML file, use publicly available assets, models, and effects for the game. And in just one prompt, here's what I got. Notice that it's actually giving me a racetrack with other players. And indeed, if I hover over these green sections, then it does give me a speed boost. And I can even see the track and where I am in the lower right corner. That is super impressive. I've been trying this prompt with all the top models out there, and none of them could actually create a full racetrack with multiple players that actually work zero shot. But Minimax was able to do this in just one prompt. That's pretty incredible. Or here's another really tricky prompt which I test for all the top models. Make a visual simulation of a beehive construction showing hexagonal cells forming, worker bee paths, and honey storage. Include sliders for colony size and resource availability. And here's what I got. Now, first of all, the animations do look very nice. Like the bees actually go out to forage, and once they get pollen, notice that there's an extra orange dot attached to the bee. And the bees, do fly back to the hive where they do fill up the cell with honey. That is pretty cool. Like this animation from Minimax is the most detailed one out of all the AI models I've tested. Now, there are some errors with this, like the cells aren't really aligned properly, so I do have to, minus some points for that. Next, let me increase the colony size, so that also works. Let me increase resource availability, so that also works. I guess another error is that the cells should be built adjacent to the existing hive, so it shouldn't be like separate like this. But again, this is a really tricky prompt, and so far, pretty much none of the top models have gotten this 100% correct. Alright, next up, I'm going to drag and drop this really complicated spreadsheet with a lot of financial metrics, and I got it to make a beautiful, comprehensive financial report based on this data. Use interactive graphs and charts where necessary. And here's what I got. So let me open this up, and as you can see, this is very detailed and thorough. Everything is interactive and nicely formatted. There are even extra tabs here where I can filter this by like category or by product or by quarterly trend. Very nice. And then here are some additional charts and metrics. This is very nice and thorough. And then I can click on this detailed financial breakdown, which gives me this, or I can click on expense details, which gives me this. Everything just works. Anyways, those are just some of my really quick preliminary tests. This is definitely a very capable and powerful model in terms of agentic coding and data analysis and doing some, multi-step reasoning tasks. Here are some other examples for your reference. So this person has built this 3D Christmas tree, which supports gesture interactions. So she can actually control this animation using her hand via webcam. Or here are some examples of some beautiful websites that it has coded up. Or here's another example of a 3D Lego builder using Three.js, and everything is physically correct. Best of all, you can try it for free right now. So if you click on this button over here, it takes you to Minimax's chatbot, which is pretty similar to, ChatGPT or Gemini. So here's where you would enter a prompt, and it should already automatically be Minimax M2.1. Now, the awesome thing is, in addition to running this online, as with the previous Minimax models, they've already open sourced this. So if you scroll down here, here's the link to the Hugging Face repo, and then here are all the instructions on how you can run this locally with all these different tools. If I click into this Hugging Face repo, notice that this is 229 billion parameters. And if I click on files and versions, notice that this is around 230 gigabytes in size. So I think you can even run this on just a single DGX Spark. Now, this is not meant for consumer grade GPUs. I mean, this is like the most intelligent, state-of-the-art open source model out there. So this is more meant for enterprises who just want to run models locally. But anyways, if that is of interest to you, then they have open sourced this, so you can just download the model to run on your own servers. Anyways, all the info is on this page, so if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this in the description below. Now, Minimax isn't the only state-of-the-art open source model that was released this week. So ZAI also dropped GLM 4.7, and this is also insanely good at agentic coding and tool use and complex reasoning. In fact, if you look at these benchmark scores, it also rivals the top models out there like Claude 4.5 and GPT 5.1 in terms of these standard benchmarks like competitive math and graduate level science questions, and even humanities last exam where it scored the highest. These are like questions from some really obscure scientific domains. Same with SWE Bench Verified. This is a very capable model that even rivals the top closed models out there. Now, I already did a full review video on this when it first came out this week, where I got it to create an Android OS simulation, I got it to create a 3D racing game, a fully working SimCity game, plus a fully working video editor. This is really good at coding things, it has the least amount of errors, and everything just works. I'm not going to repeat too much here, but definitely see this video if you haven't already to learn more about all the cool things that GLM 4.7 can do. Next up, this AI is pretty interesting. So it's called Spatia, Video Generation with Updated Spatial Memory, and this AI can basically make videos where the scene stays consistent over time. So it keeps a 3D memory of the scene, as you can see from the lower left corner, so that long videos remain coherent. So you can move away from an original spot and then pan back to the spot, and the scene would remain the same. So here are more examples for your reference. And this tech would be extremely useful for creating virtual reality scenes for real estate or other locations where you require that everything is actually factually accurate. Now, because it has essentially generated a 3D world, you can then micro-edit this 3D world by adding or removing elements like this. So this can also function as a video editor. Or here's another cool example. If this is your original video, well, it will convert this into a 3D scene, and then you can prompt it to add storm and thunder to the scene, and here's what you get. Or you can add a golden retriever playing, and here's the result. Or you can add a red sports car like this. Anyways, if you scroll up to the top of the page, here is a link to their GitHub repo. And they haven't released anything yet, but here it says the code is coming soon, so hopefully they will stick to their word and actually release the code. Anyways, if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. Next up, this AI is very useful. It's called MVInverse, and this can take a single or multiple photos of a scene at different angles and then figure out the intrinsic properties of everything in the scene. For example, you can input multiple images of this room and it can predict the albedo, or basically the color of everything in the image, plus the lighting of everything, plus the normal, or basically the orientation of the surfaces of all the objects in the image, plus the metallic properties of the image and the roughness of all the objects. So here are some additional examples of different scenes, and notice how it's able to basically predict all these properties just from a few images. And it doesn't even have to be just multiple images. You can just input one image and this would still work. Although, of course, if you add more images, then it gives it more data and its predictions will be more accurate. Here are some other examples for your reference where we input 4 views of the scene and it's able to, predict all these properties pretty accurately. Here's another example where the scene is very complicated with a lot of chairs and other objects, but it's able to still get everything pretty accurately. The awesome thing is, if you scroll up to the top of the page, they have released a GitHub repo, and here it contains all the instructions on how you can download and run this locally on your computer. Anyways, if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. Also this week, ByteDance releases something pretty useful called DreamMontage. Instead of just creating a video with a text prompt, here it basically allows you to upload multiple keyframes to control exactly what happens in the video. So for example, here, if we upload these 4 keyframes, which should occur at seconds 0, 5, 10, and 15, this AI is able to basically fill in the blanks of the video so that it matches all these keyframes. Or here's another example where we have first a water droplet, which should transform into the second keyframe, which is a swan, and then the third keyframe is a watch, followed by the 4th keyframe at the 12-second mark, which should be a rose, and this AI is able to basically fill in the blanks and generate a very smooth and coherent video from these reference frames. Or here's an even trickier example where the frames are pretty much irrelevant. It starts with a gorilla and then a caveman and then a knight riding a horse, but it's able to blend everything seamlessly, as you can see from the video. Or here's another cool example. Notice the prompt first, where we first have an old man, and then we need to zoom into his eye, and then we have a man walking forward with a golden butterfly appearing, and then it flies forward to fully obscure the lens. And then it switches to these other keyframes. And here's the resulting video. So it does zoom into the old man's eye, followed by this guy walking in the city, followed by this butterfly which flies into the lens, and then followed by this scene with the boy playing in this meadow, and then it zooms up to the boy's face. Really cool. Or here's another example where we can start off with this mountain, and then it zooms into this town, and then it zooms into one particular house in the town, which looks like this. Or here's another fun example. In the past, for most video generators, we do have start and end frames, but this steps it up by allowing you to add even intermediate frames in the video, which gives you even more control over how the video should progress over time. Now, if you scroll up to the top of the page, they have released a technical report. It doesn't look like they've released any code for this, but you can try it out using their DreamMontage platform by clicking on this new multi-frames feature. So here is where you can upload multiple frames to control your video. Anyways, if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. Next up, this AI is also very useful. It's called 3D Regen, and this takes a single photo of an indoor scene and can turn it into a complete editable 3D scene. This means it can create a 3D model of the room, including all the objects inside it. And you can also select each object and move them around or edit them further. And if you compare this with other 3D scene generators, note that this new one, which is the third column, is just a lot more consistent at capturing all the objects and elements in the scene. Here are some other examples for your reference. It's even able to generate that really tricky ceiling light pretty accurately. Now, this can also do an outdoor scene like what you see in the lower right corner, but the quality isn't as good as indoor scenes. Now, if you scroll up to the top of the page, they have released a GitHub repo, and here it says the paper is currently under review. They plan to release the code at the end of January 2026. Anyways, if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. Also this week, NVIDIA releases a pretty interesting AI called Carry 4D. This can take a video of a person interacting with any object, like picking up a ball or playing with a toy, and then it can create a 3D reconstruction of the scene, including the human and the object. So it can basically reconstruct the person and the object in 3D and track how they move and interact with each other over time. Now, this technology is of course very useful for training humanoid robots. We can then use this 3D data of how humans use and manipulate objects to train a humanoid robot brain through reinforcement learning on how to do the same thing. And if you compare this new Carry 4D method with other competitor tools like VizTracker, notice that this new one is just a lot more consistent with fewer errors. Or here's another example comparing another tool called Intertrack, and note that again, it just has a lot more errors compared with this new Carry 4D method on the right. Here's another comparison for your reference. And again, this new Carry 4D method is just a lot more accurate. By the way, you don't even have to plug in a video with a clean background. So the background can be super messy like this, but it's still able to extract and only detect the human plus the object that they're moving. Now, if you scroll up to the top of the page, they have released a GitHub repo, and here it says they are planning to release the code in January 2026, so stay tuned for that. For now, if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. Next up, this AI is pretty interesting. It's called Animate Any Character in Any World, or AniX for short, and this allows you to basically drop any 3D character into any 3D world and control what they do using a simple text prompt. And it would generate a video of this action. You can specify exactly what you want them to do, plus an optional camera position. So here are some examples for your reference. We can drop any of these 3D characters into the scene and get them to run or walk around like this. So it's as if they are now a player in a video game. Or here are some additional examples of dropping some other characters but in the same background for your reference. And you can also do the reverse, so you can input the same character but get them to run around in different 3D worlds like this. It's able to blend the characters seamlessly with the scene. Now, you don't have to just get them to walk or run around. You can get them to do much more complex actions just with a text prompt. So for example, here we can drop a 3D render of Jensen Huang into this 3D world, and just with a text prompt, we can get him to clap his hands, or dust with a feather duster, or play a harp, or blocks with gloves, etc. Here are some even more complicated prompts with some additional objects like an umbrella or lifting with dumbbells, eating a slice of pizza, but it's still able to render this pretty well. Here are some more examples for your reference. Anyways, if you scroll up to the top of the page, they have released a GitHub repo, and here it does say the code is coming soon, which is fantastic. For now, if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. And that sums up all the highlights in AI this week. Let me know in the comments what you think of all of this. Which piece of news was your favorite, and which tool are you most looking forward to trying out? As always, I will be on the lookout for the top AI news and tools to share with you. So if you enjoyed this video, remember to like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content. Also, there's just so much happening in the world of AI every week, I can't possibly cover everything on my YouTube channel. So to really stay up to date with all that's going on in AI, be sure to subscribe to my free weekly newsletter. The link to that will be in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.